It's been a little while since we put together one of these compilation videos of Joe Biden's gaffes, and oh boy, do we have a lot of material to go over. We're going to break this video down into 3 parts. Part one is going to deal with the general unprofessional nature of these basement live streams that Joe Biden's been doing. Part 2 is going to go through Joe Biden's forgetfulness, his inability to remember basic details and how that gets him into trouble. And part 3 is going to deal with things that he should not have said, either because they're disgusting or because they're really bad policy proposals. So those are going to be the 3 parts of this video. But before we get into it, please do hit the thumbs up. Please do like this video. Please do share and comment. It really helps us get this in front of more people. So this first video is Joe Biden saying, don't worry, he's going to beat Joe Biden.
I'm prepared to say that I have a record of over 40 years and that I'm going to beat Joe Biden. Look at my record.
So I guess he's going to beat Joe Biden. People who are with it tend to not accidentally talk about defeating themselves, but I guess that's Joe Biden's new strategy. Yes, he is defeating himself. Joe Biden is his own worst enemy. This next clip, we covered it on our channel. It can only be described as Joe Biden, I guess, potentially soiling himself on camera.
Programs. Or stop work on roads and bridges. So what does the human cost?
Well, that happened. That happened. This next clip is Joe Biden actually showing that he's using a teleprompter during these supposedly off-the-cuff interviews. This is a clip of him yelling at his staff to move the text on the teleprompter.
In which you are moving through the opening process.
Well, we started with exactly what you said. There's a big state. We have 67 counties, and they are all very different. So what is good in southeastern Pennsylvania is very different.
So what he's talking about is whoever's running his teleprompter, he wants them to move the text up or down. He wants them to set the text up the way he wants it, which, as we've covered in a previous video, Joe Biden is using a teleprompter during these videos. He's pretending to be off the cuff, but he's using a teleprompter, which is why it's even more surprising just how big of a mess he is in many of these interviews. Here's another example of Joe Biden yelling at his staff to turn up the volume because he can't hear what's going on.
Let me ask you about
I'm having trouble hearing you. Can they turn up the volume a little bit for me? Because I'm having trouble hearing you. I do apologize.
I apologize, Mr. Vice President.
So we've all had this happen. If you do enough interviews, eventually technical difficulties happen. You can't hear someone. But there's ways to go about it other than looking over and screaming, hey, turn up the volume. I can't hear what's going on. It's a total lack of professionalism all around. So now we're going to get into the part of this video dealing with Joe Biden's forgetfulness, which if you've watched our part 1 and part 2 detailing the obvious signs of mental decline that Joe Biden's exhibiting, this is a big deal. This clip is Joe Biden forgetting the name of the coronavirus.
Thousands of meatpacker workers got sick, got the virus, and some died.
So I can understand not knowing COVID-19 in the beginning, though Joe Biden to this day continues to give COVID-19 a different name, COVID-10, COVID-9, things like that. I can understand not knowing coronavirus in the beginning, but by now this has entered our lexicon. Everyone knows the word, and you can say Corona for short if you want, though the beer company will hate you for it. The fact that Joe Biden, in his train of thought, tries to get the word coronavirus out, fails, and has to just refer to it as the virus, is a serious warning sign of mental decline. Anyone who's had to go through and experienced a family member suffering from dementia would be able to tell you this is an obvious sign of mental decline. Next clip is Joe Biden completely losing his place and having to rely on his notes to have to get him through.
This is causing great anxiety, and there's a lot we can do that related to what has already been passed with small businesses that the president just hasn't done. And look, the combination of failing to move quickly.
That is very painful to watch. This is obviously a very scripted conversation, and to see him so obviously lost and having to rely on his notes is very, very confusing. This next clip shows Joe Biden getting confused during a conversation about renewable energy and ends up proposing a nationwide system to transmit coal.
that, I mean, we should be we should become the net exporter of the new technology by investing the $40 billion in the $400 billion I'm proposing in research and development for new ways to absorb carbon, new ways to, make sure that we can have a system nationwide that can transmit coal and wind across the country. But we're not investing in those things, Joe.
While this might not feel like that big of a deal, to have a conversation about renewable energy and to end up forgetting that and instead advocate a system to transmit coal across the country is a big mistake. This clip, I don't know, the best way I can describe it is Joe Biden's brain just stops working.
And we're going to create a new bio-based multi-manufacturing job environment to deal farmers in on the benefits of a changing economy.
I don't know. I mean, it's worse gibberish, but it's definitely up there. Now, these next two clips are Joe Biden trying to use his experience as vice president in handling the stimulus program that in response to the recession of 2008, 2009. Except he doesn't remember how much money was actually in that stimulus plan. Watch.
The president put me in charge of getting out the recovery money, which was it was 80, almost $89 billion. I guess it came to 84 at the end, 84 billion.
And it's not just then. There was another instance in the last week where Joe Biden tried to bring up his handling of the stimulus program, but again, couldn't remember actually how much money was in it.
I had the job of getting out $84 billion in 18 months in the Recovery Act.
I don't know. Here's a video of just Joe Biden completely fumbling during an interview.
Look, one of the things that that I think is really important is that we somehow put that back on. There's somehow that we're in a situation where we...
Here is a clip of Joe Biden saying, as long as he can remember, and then saying since the 1970s, basically saying that he can only remember going back to the 1970s.
And every year from the time as long as I can remember, since the early 70s, I've gone to the bridge. That's the place where we have a major event every year.
If you're going to use the phrase going back as far as I can remember, and then you're going to supplement that by including the 70s, the early 70s, when at that point you would have been in your late 20s, early 30s, that's not a good look, especially when you're being accused of being in mental decline, having a bad problem with your memory. So this next part of the video, we're going to deal with the things that Joe Biden just shouldn't have said, either because they're horrible and repugnant, or because as a policy proposal, they're absolutely disastrous. So I'm not going to play the clip of him telling African Americans that if they can't decide between him and Trump, then they're not really black. I'm not going to play that. Everyone's seen that at this point. I am going to play, though, the follow-up interview where he explained that he said it because the interviewer was being a wise guy.
I want to ask you about the remark you made last week on the Breakfast Club. You said, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or for Trump, you ain't black.
Well,
now, you've since said that you shouldn't have been so cavalier. But during the same interview, you said the NAACP has endorsed me every time I've run, which isn't true. So my question for you is about what some supporters say they're worried about, which is that all of this could end up hurting the enthusiasm that you really need to win among black voters.
Well, first of all, it was a mistake, number one. And I was smiling when he asked me the question. I shouldn't have been such a wise guy with him. He was being a wise guy, and I responded kind.
He should just stop there. He should have apologized. When you apologize, and then you say, but the guy was being a wise guy, it undercuts your apology. So that was, I thought that this follow-up might have actually been worse than the actual statement. Actually, no, that original statement was horrible. This next clip is Joe Biden saying that he might not necessarily comply with a congressional subpoena.
Wisconsin's Republican Senator Ron Johnson has spearheaded a number of investigations targeting you and your family. Homeland Security voted today on subpoenas. He's requesting more documents be unsealed regarding Michael Flynn. Will you comply with any of his inquiries if he asks of you between now and November?
Well, look, first of all, he didn't get any subpoena to subpoena me or my son or any family member, number one. Number two, this is a great diversion.
So when Donald Trump, when the news was suggesting that Donald Trump might be subpoenaed, and when he insinuated that he wouldn't comply, everyone accused him of being a threat to democracy, a threat to the rule of law. But here Joe Biden is saying that he might not comply with a congressional subpoena, and he's just being let off the hook. This next clip, I think, is actually one of the most damaging. We've heard from Democrats that they want to use the coronavirus as an excuse to push their agenda through. But Joe Biden kind of reiterated that in this next clip. But instead, he talked about rewriting our social contract. And I'll explain why that's really, really important on the other side of this clip.
From this pandemic, you can remake the world as it should be. To see COVID-19 as a force majeure that compels us to rewrite the social contract that's been scrambled by nature's fury and human failures. You can set the terms for an economy, healthcare system, education system, immigration system, and a justice system that uplifts more people of every race, gender, and generation. You can build a truly representative democracy with more facts than lies, less money, and more people in the voting process. You can win the race against climate change by writing the laws and structures that rally the rest of the world to build a safer, more resilient, and sustainable future.
So first of all, Joe Biden is clearly reading a teleprompter. If you watch his eyes, this is a speech that's pre-written. He's not just talking, he's reading a teleprompter. So take that for what it is. But secondly, I want to talk about this idea of social contract theory, because what Joe Biden is actually proposing is far more radical than anything we've heard from Democrats so far, which so far has been that we need to use this crisis to our advantage to push our agenda through. We expect that from Democrats. Their motto is never let a good crisis go to waste. But what Joe Biden's talking about is actually far more radical. If you haven't read into social contract theory, you haven't read political philosophy, I highly recommend that you pick up Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan and John Locke's Treatise on Government. I highly recommend that you read these two pieces because they explain together, obviously one came before the other, but together they can help explain the idea of America. America is built on the idea that we cannot all be the arbiters of our own justice. The theory goes that in a state of nature, every man is responsible for himself, and that if they're wrong, that person has the right then to pursue whoever has wronged them and deliver justice on their own. So if someone robs from you, you can hunt them down, and in a state of nature where it's anarchy, no rules at all, you can kill them for it. But man understands that the state of nature is too volatile for us to live in. There's too many risks involved. So we form communities, we form society, we form government to be able to deliver justice, right? That's the whole point of that. So when you enter into this social contract, you agree to give up some of your natural rights that you would have in nature, in anarchy without any rules. You give up some of those rights to the government so that if someone steals from you, you can't just hunt them down yourself. The government is the one that delivers justice. Social contract theory, if you look at Locke, the idea of social contract theory is that it's not set in stone. If you have given the government certain rights to protect your liberties, and you don't like what the government is doing, Locke, social contract theory, says that you can basically rip up the contract and overthrow your government. That's the basis of the idea. So when you hear Joe Biden talking about rewriting social contract theory, what he's saying is he's advocating taking away more rights. Right? When you say you're going to rewrite our social contract, he's not going to give the American people more rights. He's going to take more rights from people. So it's very, very, very radical, far more radical than anything we've heard from Clyburn or Pelosi when it comes to making sure that they take advantage of the crisis. And this last clip, I just think is really funny. Joe Biden admits that he's hiding in his basement, but says it's working out well for him.
You know, all this stuff about Biden's hiding, well, you know, the fact of the matter is it's working pretty well.
Well, I guess he's perfectly happy with hiding because he thinks it's working well for him. But as we've seen from this video and our other videos, he is a gaffe machine, and he's saying a lot in his basement that he's going to come to regret. Well, that's going to be it for this video. Again, please do like the video. Please do share it. Share it. Facebook does not let us reach people organically anymore. So please do hit that share button, and please do leave a comment. It really helps us as we reach more people with our content. Thank you so much.